Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Trev back again here to bring you another video. So this time we'll be doing a video talking about Anderson Silva, and I'm titling this video, Is Anderson Silva the best mixed martial artist so far? Or pretty much, in the years that we've had this sport, and even before, is Anderson Silva the best fighter ever, essentially? Or at least up to this point. Other fighters, let's talk about a few of them. I'm going to focus on 4 fighters really that are close to Anderson Silva, and including him, and kind of break it down and discuss and give you my opinion on who I think probably is the best mixed martial artist of all time. So let's go over some records, and we'll talk about that, and then we'll get back into Anderson Silva after we talk about the others. So let's start off with a guy who's either going to be probably number 1 or number 2. Definitely very close to the top, and was at the top until a couple years ago. It wasn't really debatable about 2 or 3 years ago that the greatest mixed martial artist of all time, or up till then, was Fedor Emelianenko. There's no question about that. He was undefeated for almost 10 years. He was 32-1 after beating Brett Rogers. Just an insane record, 32-1. Like that's just crazy, like one loss, and that was by a doctor stoppage. He didn't even actually get submitted. He didn't quit. He didn't tap. He didn't lose a decision. It was a doctor stoppage due to a cut. He probably would have won that fight if they would have kept fighting. So 32-1 up to a couple years ago. Since then, Fedor has lost 3 straight. Now, nobody really debated it earlier, but since he's lost these 3, his record has become 32-4, which pretty much puts him almost even with Anderson, who at this point is 31-4. So they're almost neck and neck. Fedor having 1 more win than Anderson, and looking like he's probably not going to get any more wins over reputable guys at this point. So definitely, I think he is probably the biggest competition against Anderson in this situation for who is the greatest of all time. Now, this is a matter of opinion, really, because they both have almost equal records, and Fedor did go undefeated for so long. The only thing about Fedor is, and the big difference between him and Anderson, is that Fedor, after Pride, when he was 27-1, he started fighting in other leagues, started fighting in Affliction, Bodog Fight, a few others, and then of course ended up in Strikeforce and eventually lost. So a lot of people's opinion is that Fedor probably, since about 2006, hasn't been the best fighter in the world and hasn't been on top. Whereas there's no debating that Anderson in his weight class is on top and has been on top now for a long time. Let's see here. 2006 was when Anderson last lost a fight in Pride, in Rumble on the Rock, when he up-kicked and knocked out Yushin Okami. That's a technical one. I'm not going to count that. Let's go back further to Ryo Chonin, who actually did beat Anderson at Pride Shockwave, catching him with a flying scissor hook, flying heel hook, and beating him with that. That was in 2004. So it's been since 2004. Anderson Silva's pretty much been undefeated now for 7 years, and he's been at the top of the game. He's been at the UFC almost the whole time, beating everybody they can throw at him. They can't find a guy that can really, Chael Sonnen was the closest to beating him, but other than that, nobody else has even come close, really. Okay, so that's Fedor. Whether or not you want to consider Fedor as being better than Anderson, he was undefeated for a longer amount of time, and Fedor didn't have any losses at the beginning of his career. But I kind of think, what is, the 2 major criticisms are, was he ever really that good after Pride? I mean, we all know he was the best in the world in Pride. There's no question about it. But after Pride ended a couple years later, and, was he really the best? I mean, he was fighting Matt Linden. He was fighting Hong Man Choi. He was fighting a lot of these guys. It's kind of like, what the heck? Are these guys are, kind of freak show fights, kind of. So, I think that's kind of hard to say. But I would have to say that I think probably at this point you have to go with Anderson as being the best, or better than Fedor anyway. I think you kind of have to, just because, Fedor's competition was questionable. Had he have gone to the UFC right after Pride, I think we would have saw him lose within a year or 2, and he wouldn't have had those extra 3-4 years on his record of being undefeated. 5 years. Yeah, it looks like it was 5 years that he went undefeated almost, but you know, because of the fact that pretty much, you know, he didn't really fight any good guys. So let me know what you guys think about that. I put Fedor at number 2. I think Anderson's better. Other guys that are worth honorable mention: George St. Pierre. He's 22-2 at this point, with 2 serious losses. One coming from a submission by Matt Hughes, another coming from a TKO punch from Matt Serra. Other than that, he's been undefeated. So he's been undefeated now for 4 years. So that's quite a while, and he's got 22-2. So I think it's too early in his career yet to say if he's going to be, you know, as good as Fedor, as good as Anderson. I think he'll have to go for another 8 fights before we can really say if he's undefeated for another 4 or 5 years, then he can make a case. But at this point, he just doesn't have enough fights. 22-2, it's just not enough fights as of yet. So I think George St. Pierre, I'd put him at probably number 4. Number 3, I would put Matt Hughes. Matt Hughes is 45 he's 45-9 right now, with a couple losses in a row coming from BJ Penn, Josh Koscheck, and he was the UFC welterweight champ for a long time. At one point, his best record was 41-4 when he beat BJ Penn before losing finally to George St. Pierre. I mean, the amount of fights this guy has is astonishing. He's got 54 fights, almost all at the highest level. Almost, you know, like he's got the most wins in the UFC. Just amazing the amount of fights he's got. I don't know many guys that will have a career where they will have 45 fights or 45 victories and 54 fights. That's crazy. I mean, he's got to retire soon, but I would definitely put Matt Hughes at number 3 as the 3rd greatest of all time. Other than that, you know, you've got other guys, but nobody really who comes close to these guys yet. You know, you've got some up-and-comers. John Jones is coming up, and whether or not he'll stay undefeated is hard to say. Cain Velasquez is coming up. He's been undefeated for a while. So there's a lot of new guys coming up, but they're still early on in their career. These guys are around 10, 15 wins, whereas Anderson, Fedor, these guys, they have over 30 wins, okay, and only lost a couple times. So at this point, I think it's safe to say now that Anderson is the best ever. As long as he doesn't lose his next couple fights, if he wins for another year or two, he is pretty much the best fighter of all time, the best mixed martial artist so far we've ever had, with Fedor coming in a close second. Let me know what you guys think. Do you put Anderson as the best fighter ever? Do you put Fedor, GSP maybe, or Matt Hughes? What do you guys think? Let me know. All right, later.